It's August 30th, 2024, and I'm on my way to Asheville, North Carolina. Quick trip today to see the wonderful poet Mildred Barya. Man, it's such a gift to know Mildred, even though I've only known her for a short period of time. And I'm sure we'll get into this during our conversation today, but her life's journey from Uganda to Asheville is truly remarkable. And not because of what it is on the surface. The job titles she's held, the places she's moved, but it's the spirit in which she made these decisions and the way she's lived her life. And I just believe there's so much we all can learn from that. And I really admire Mildred for the risks she's taken and her ability to just trust herself and make moves and just see what happens. If you work with students or you have friends or family that are struggling with making big decisions in life, they might want a new job. They might want to move somewhere that's totally different than anywhere else they've ever known. Then listen to this episode. Send them this episode, because I think it's the type of medicine they're going to need. It's going to help them, bring them comfort, and embolden them to make these big decisions and trust themselves and just go with it. And even though Mildred has lived in so many places all across the world, and it might seem like these are random choices, like she doesn't know what she's doing, but it's all rooted in something much deeper. And I think underlying all of Mildred's journey is poetry, the life of poetry. Poetry is everywhere, and Mildred sees that. And I love being around people who look at life through that lens. And when we first met and had an hours-long conversation back in the spring, it confirmed my suspicions about how great Mildred is and why we're going to be friends for a long time, or at least I hope so. I remember reading her latest book of poetry, The Animals of My Earth School, back in the spring. And then as I worked my way through the rest of her catalog, you could just feel in all of that she truly is a curious person who believes all of the places in this world are full of wonder, and that you should be curious about people. And you should want to make connections with the earth and with each other. And I think if you live by that, you had a great life. And I want to share Mildred's life journey, her spirit, and her poetry with people, because I believe she can bring us closer to the earth and to each other. So on this winding journey of life, I'm glad I found my way to Mildred. And I'm so happy to share her work and who she is, and the books she puts on the bed with you. As I drive and make my way to these wonderful people that I have these conversations with, it always hits me. The greatest gift we can give to each other is true and deep appreciation for the time we spend with each other in physical space, not distracted, truly there to listen to each other and to share with one another. That cannot be corrupted. And I appreciate Mildred so much for giving me this time. So I'm going to enjoy the rest of this beautiful drive, and I'll see you all up in Asheville. You're listening to Books on the Bed, where I travel through the country asking our hosts, if I came to your town and stayed at your house, what books would you put on my bed? Each host will share 6 books for me to carry with me on the journey of my life. And I'm here to share those books with you. As we go, we're building a digital library with every book put on every bed across the country. And who knows, maybe someday, the world. we are trying to share as many diverse stories as possible to part a curtain between us and bring us closer to each other. We hope these books and conversations make a meaningful difference in your life. Thank you for listening and being with us on this journey. Like I said, it doesn't feel that long since we last spoke.
Yeah.
But I think it's because there are certain conversations that are just so nourishing. And that's what I felt like meeting you. I knew we'd have a lot in common and we'd have a great conversation, but it really meant a lot to me throughout the summer to have that, because it was like the thaw.
It was
like it was starting, spring was coming.
Yeah.
I just got the new job at City Lights.
Yeah.
It just felt like my whole life was starting to bloom again.
Yes.
And we met.
You were happy.
Yeah.
You're still happy, which is good. Which is really good.
But yeah, our talk really was just something that I held on to till we met again, because it was so, I like when people give me a new perspective to think about my own life from theirs. And you gave me a lot to think about. Wow. So it was really,
I don't
really
even
wonderful.
remember what I said.
Usually you don't, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I just liked that it was very free-flowing. It was natural. Yeah. And I just made a new friend. And so I want to thank you for being here, because
you're welcome.
It means a lot to me.
Thank you so much, too.
It's just friendship. It's kinship through stories. And our lives are so different.
Yeah.
Which you would think then, it would be harder to get to know each other. But I think our life journeys share a lot in common just because of the wandering nature of them.
Yeah.
And I think about it, though. Your words are such a gift to me, and your poems and your life, because it strangely comforts me to know that as long as I'm honest, I'm on the right path. As long as I keep going and I'm true to self, it's okay.
Yes.
And that's a big deal. And so because of your influence on me, even in just the little time we spent together, I like to start with gifts for you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I know.
You didn't have to.
You'll see.
My gosh. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Wow.
It's just important that,
I love the wrapping too. And I'm sure the gifts are precious, but just the way they even look. Oh,
yeah. I've gotten a lot better at wrapping since I started working as a bookseller.
So should I open them?
You should open them, absolutely. Okay. So I won't give away too much until after you open it.
Perfect.
But
this is so sweet. It's almost like I don't want to open them because they are so well wrapped. You should see how I wrap my gifts. It's like a chicken did it. So I'm like, this is so sweet.
So if you've read or have a copy of both of these, I have backups that we'll do later.
Yeah.
But you can open this and I'll tell people. I need to remember always to say the title and the author, because I always forget.
Wow. Wow. I don't have a copy of this. It's called Mama Day.
So this came from, I read your latest book of poetry, Animals of My Earth School, while I was in Washington.
Wow.
And I'd been spending a lot of time reading Indigenous authors. And because of your connection to the earth, and how much you write about our connection to the earth and how that reflects how we treat each other.
Right.
I wanted you to give this book, or give you this book. And also, I'm interviewing his granddaughter in New Mexico on Monday.
Wow. Oh, that's why you're going to New Mexico.
So she was on top of mind, and her book of poetry, the epilogue is her grandfather's words about the earth. And this book really moved me, and I think you will find that you'll feel the same, the same power of his words. So
thank you so much. This is a precious gift. I am ready to start reading tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, you'll sit down in one sitting and finish it. Because it's such a...
It looks small, but actually this one, I like to take it in bites. Like not... Yeah, because I can. And
savor it
kind
for
of
sure.
A gluttony when I get a good book. But I'm also telling myself, no, savor. Don't just consume it. Like you're not a consumer.
Yeah, don't be... What is Eudora Welty's mom says... Or Eudora Welty said her mother sank into novels like a hedonist.
Yes. That's how I sometimes do it. And then I tell myself, no, savor, stop now. Think about what you've just taken in, like chew it, like ruminate, like bring it back, ruminate, stay with that, and tomorrow proceed. Like don't. So it's a new way of reading, which actually is good. Yeah, to savor the books.
You'll remember it more.
Yeah.
You're not trying to fit it in.
Exactly, because we get trapped into this goal of finishing a book, reading and finishing a book. I was like, so if I do that, it's like I'll be, yes, enjoying it, but also the goal will be to finish it. I was like, why would I want to finish this book?
The goal is to read it.
And there's a different,
like
exactly.
Read is an active word.
It is active.
Skim is not read.
No.
And to read with haste is to sacrifice the depth of a story.
Exactly.
So this one I got because it has a lot.
I was planning to buy this book. I put it on my list because Natalie came to speak here.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I attended her talk. So I wrote it. And if I hadn't traveled in the summer, chances are I would have bought the book.
So I was thinking about this.
Gosh.
I knew you'd love it, not only because of all the people that are featured in the book. And do you mind saying the title of? We
Are Each Other's Harvest.
And it's a book about African-American farming.
Right.
And I know it's U.S. based, but where you're from in Uganda is agricultural.
It is very agricultural.
And, you even, like in Western North Carolina, is almost its own version of where you're from.
Yes.
And so I just thought about where you're from, how much farming is important there. But again, back to your writing, you cannot separate you from the earth. And I just thought you'd appreciate this perspective.
These are very thoughtful gifts, incredibly thoughtful. Because you're right, this is perfect. And the essay I'm working on right now, I have the draft, so I'm revising it. It's really about, I call it the seed essay, because it's about women who carried seeds in their hair. So apparently, the women who were captured from Africa, this is one version of the story of changing the African foodways here in the U.S. The foods like rice, cassava, the foods that we are brought here are always associated with like the white people, starting that. But these women who were on the ship, before they got on the ship, they put rice in their hair. So when they arrived in South Carolina, they planted the rice and they told their children how that food will feed them. Yeah. So when I discovered the resources and the research, I really went down the rabbit hole. I was like, this story is amazing. I am going to write it and bring in the seeds that are from home. And then I realized that it's the same. It changes in terms of who tells who. In the Colomba in Brazil, it's the children who carry the seeds in their hair. In South Carolina and French Guinea, it's the women. And so I've been, checking different sources and connecting them. And it's the kind of rice that came from West Africa, one of the original, really like the first. So, and I was, again, my ignorance, I had always associated rice with Asia. I didn't think of rice being an indigenous African crop.
Interesting.
And Judith, Judith, I forget her other name. Her first name is Judith. The scholar has done research and traveled to the West Africa place where you can analyze the soil and know like what was grown there. Mm-hmm. And so she has the right dates, how way back into the past before colonialism, that was the rice grown. And also because it was red rice, brown rice and white rice, and it was also used in rituals for different purposes. So when I found that out, I was like, I am going to do add my narrative to all this. And so this book, anyway, all to say that food farming here this book will take me back home because there is something about food pathways that will be coming from there. And also the foods they grow here, the black-eyed peas. Those are from Congo, like Congolese food. And they are now, African-American food, which is right. And also they are embraced by several other cultures. I attended a Jewish function and it was organized here, Farm to Table at UNCA. And so I was curious about Jewish food. I was like, I wonder what we're going to eat. Mm-hmm. And I told my partner to come with me. So we came, guess what we ate? Rice and black-eyed peas.
There we go.
I was like, what? It's over. I was like, and then at first I was like, but they're not actually acknowledging the source of this food. So Africans worked in the Jewish homes as domestic workers. And, so I'm trying to see like how the black-eyed peas and rice really became Jewish food in North Carolina. I was like, oh, well, okay. This is interesting to me that I came here excited about eating Jewish food and I'm eating black-eyed peas.
How funny.
And okra. And there was okra. I was like, okay, they should change the name of this function because this is like African food.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. It was so funny.
Isn't it great when you find these sources of information that you just have to keep going?
Yes.
And then you want to find those connections, which also, one of the things I remember most about our first conversation, which was hours and probably could have gone even longer than that, was just the way you see every place in your journey of life that you've been and all these people as connected to each other, even if they don't know it.
Exactly.
And so you finding those connections with the food pathways and wanting to dive deeper in that research, that's not surprising to me. I'm just glad that this struck a chord.
This will strike
There was just something about it. And what's funny is I had bought this for a different author last year.
Yeah.
And it was one of two options that I was going to give them.
Yes.
And then I just decided on the other one. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to give this away. I'm going to wait for the right person to give it to.
Wow.
And here we are.
Thank you.
So I think you're going to love it.
I will love it. And this lady, Lee Pennyman, I think one of them is here on the cover. But also she lives in New York City, upstate New York, and she has a farm. And so I had read about her, how she's teaching young people to farm. There's a new movement really that's returning to the land. And again, she's from Ghana, but born here. So she's bringing in the rituals of that surround food and how you can bless the seeds when you're planting them. So yes, I will enjoy this book because it was on my radar, but I didn't have it. So these are two perfect gifts.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
And I like to mix it up with genre because I love fiction.
Yeah.
And it's very important. But to me, most of the best fiction is rooted in knowing history.
Yes.
Understanding where we come from.
Yes.
And especially in this country, we don't know enough about where our food came from, where plants and animals came from, why flowers are named, certain things they're named. And I think being able to get to the root of those and understanding where they came from helps us understand ourselves better and acknowledge.
Exactly. Yeah, acknowledgement is key for me. Because I was like, at the end of the day, we are all into, like, there's this fusion of cultures, and that's okay, and also connections. But I do need to acknowledge that, this food that I now eat or now love, it used to be consumed by this type of group, or this corn, or this way of planting corn and squash and beans. I love it because I can see that it works. It's from indigenous Americans, Native Americans, and it was their practice. It's like acknowledge. Don't just say that. So I was that farm to dinner.
Farm to table.
Farm to table. Sorry, I'm bastardizing it. They said, they mentioned the person who started it, like who came up with it. I said, no. Africans and Native Americans have always been doing farm to table, like forever. Like we never had this, we had storage for, like extra, but what we ate, we always picked it from the garden and from the earth and ate it. Like we were the practitioners of family. So it's like, just attributing it to this white man that he came up with it. It is
always the case in America. I'm going to say the United States of America because it's what I know.
Shocking.
But if someone makes a phrase for something, they end up getting credit for it. And it's all a trick of rhetoric. So farm to table became a thing.
Right.
But the difference is other cultures lived it. They didn't name it. It was who they are. It's what they did.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm not someone who wants to shun people for not knowing history. We aren't taught it. Let's be real, how many white people are going to pick up that book?
That's true.
Not many, but the best we can do, and this is what this is all about, is share it so that people might get curious enough to say, oh, what about these people that are writing in here and these back to the land type of movements that aren't for show.
Yes.
It's really returning to, as you said, ritual and
It is a
spirit,
ritual. Yeah.
because that's what's important to these cultures. And they lost a lot of it when they came
Right.
here, if not all of
Right.
it. And so
Yeah.
anyway, I just, not to get on my soapbox,
Yeah,
but
but
I knew
that's-
you'd like these.
I love them. Oh
and
my
Scott
gosh.
Momaday, Earthkeeper, is one of my
Yeah.
Bibles.
I
I'd
haven't
say at
read
this point,
one.
it's going to be something for the rest of my life I go back to, and just certain passages at certain moments, I'm going to need those words. And so I'm excited for you to read both of them.
Thank you.
I talk about the people in front of me. Your work is just important as the books you share. And so I think it helps frame up what you're going to share as well, because it's coming
Right.
from you.
Right.
And one of the reasons that I chose especially the second book, We Are Each Other's Harvest, is there was one poem that to me just really felt like a good embodiment of who you are and how you look at the world, and is the world is necessary even for little ants.
Oh, wow. I love that poem, actually. Thank you for choosing that.
It was the one I remember even the first time I read it. I was like, we're going to talk about this because it says, let us not be known as the people who withhold compassion instead of serving the greater good. I want to see goodness for you, for me, for all of us living creatures. In my old country, ants will strip a forest bare. Whatever it takes, patience grows, hard work, hard times, tireless labors. Oh, how they travail, community-minded. Let us become ants to one another.
Wow. You've read it so well. Yeah.
And it's just, I feel like that's who you are,
Wow.
and
Thank
why you write. And it comes out in a lot of your work, not just this book. So I want to start, though, with your journey. And we can't cover the whole thing, obviously, because it's so long.
Where do we begin?
But symbolism with the earth is what's going to guide this conversation. So I remember reading on your website the first time how you said the best symbolism for your life is the baobab tree.
Right. Yes.
Can you talk about why that is the best symbol for how your life has happened and the choices you've made and where you've ended up?
That's a great question. And I think just to begin with, like a funny fact, the baobabs tend to be short trees and I happen to be a short person. But then they grow numerous branches. They branch out. They don't really grow in a straight direction. And when I was reflecting upon my life, I realized that I always change. I reach a point where it becomes so clear that that journey is ending, or that the path I'm on has reached the end. I need to start a new path. So instead of growing and going through the ranks, I'm aware that I am the kind of person to actually not care about ranks. If I feel like I'm in this position and the time has come to leave, it will not be just leaving the organization or the position, but it will be really developing a new branch. And usually the branch that needs to develop is clear to me. It comes out, it manifests. So I realized that that's how the baobab grows. It has numerous branches that just come up, and they are still connected to the main stem because it is still one tree. And I feel like that's what makes the baobabs the strongest trees, because they branch out, they develop, they continue to grow. They never stop growing, but they don't grow in a straight line or in a straight direction. And I was like, oh man, I have realized that's how I grow, but I even want to embrace that. Like I want to grow like that. So I have shocked people in the past by living, like jobs that were really very lucrative and very good. But I feel like, oh, this is it for me. Like I've reached the end of this position. I need to go back to school and study something new. And it can come across as restlessness, but I never feel restless. I always feel like this is my new path. And I put in everything. I have the passion. And then that path grows. So even coming into, creative writing and changing, realizing that I wanted to be a teacher, how that happened is that, I had worked with a publishing house in Uganda, the women writers. And then after 4 years, I was like, oh, this is it. Like I've learned everything there is. I've given everything there is. Now I want to be challenged. Like I didn't feel challenged anymore. And that is always a sign. When you can't be challenged, why stay there? Just for the money, So then I did organizational psychology. And then I became an HR consultant. And I was really good at it.
And you were good at it, right?
I was excellent.
So many people think if I'm good at it and it's going well, I can't leave.
Exactly.
But the reason the baobab tree is so true to you is because it might look chaotic or like it's not growing right.
Yes.
Maybe. If anybody wants to look it up, they'll see what it is. It's
exactly.
Like this, you are the tree, but it's going all these places, but there's nothing wrong with growing in a different direction.
Exactly.
Even when you could just stay on the same path.
Yes. I think it frustrates our parents who are like, why are you leaving now? Why are you changing your path? Especially when they see that it's a good path, for economic reasons. But I think I've always really followed my heart. I was like, well, this is no longer nourishing me joy-wise. And so joy is my measure. It's like if I feel like the joy has run out, it's one of the signs that I can't keep going, because then I start to be mechanical or just to show up for the sake of showing up. And I always want to show up because I am excited to show up. I have something to give. I have something to contribute. And when that is no longer there, that feeling is no longer there, and I'm getting frustrated and I catch myself complaining a lot, it's like, oh, great. You need to change gears here and leave, and something new will happen.
And think of all you would have lost in your life or not have experienced all the growth and change had you just said, this is good enough.
Exactly.
And that's not what life is to me. And when I talked about this comfort you brought when we met the first time, and it's hard to meet other people that have made life decisions that way. I was made to believe that I was restless and impulsive and didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
And it took me until I was 30 years old to realize they're wrong.
Exactly.
I'm right because I'm the one who's saying, it might look like this is a good situation to stay in. When I moved here from Minnesota, I knew in my bones I would regret it if I didn't leave.
Right.
Because I was coasting.
Right.
And I could have stayed.
Right.
But the reason I just gave up my address and drove around the country and worked virtually is I needed to know when I was separate from that station, no address, no identity in Minnesota anymore, did I want to be there? Right. And even though I still have very fond memories, I liked it when I left when I liked it most.
Exactly.
That was the best call. But you are you're like the embodiment of that tree, really. I mean, at least for people that I've met, because it wasn't just one time you made this call.
No, I seem to make this
Right.
this decision every 3 years. Actually, this is the longest I have held a position. And I remember I had thoughts when I reached 3 years. And then it became clear that I needed to, what I was learning then was how to stay. Because what I had been doing was to live and knowing how to live. And I realized, this is about staying, but it doesn't mean staying forever. There might be a day when it will say, okay, now you've learned how to stay, because I'm in my 8th year. And when I reached 7 years, I actually felt like maybe this is it, because I tend to be in numbers too. It's like 7 years completion. I needed a sabbatical. I was like, I do need to have a semester off and reflect upon my life and my journey and see what needs to happen next, So I did that. And it's okay with me. It's not okay with, I guess, my loved ones who will have worries for me, you know. But I was like, no, this is...
But if you feel settled and solid, that's all that matters.
Exactly.
And so I'm so glad you did, because if you hadn't, we would have never met,
That's true.
But thinking about your journey, so you were born in Uganda.
Yes.
And then just say the next steps that you took till you got here so that people understand how many different places that you lived and how different they were.
Right. So in Uganda, I was born in Kabale, which pretty much looks like Asheville, the green mountains and just the landscape. And then I went to Kampala City for my bachelor's because that's where the university was, Makerere University. So then I left home, never went back home, basically except to visit my parents. And then I started working in Kampala before I graduated, I had the job with the women writers. And then I was also writing for the newspapers because I had done literature and mass communication. So I wanted to be a journalist, and to be a journalist, you really start writing newspapers and doing the journalistic things, and then you're a journalist. It's actually not hard.
You just become one.
You just become
you
one.
write enough that you
write enough, and you follow the rules. Journalistic rules are easy to follow. There are ethical rules. There's a way to establish a style, and so I realized that for my columns, I had the style, which is why people will buy newspapers, to read certain people's columns. And then after 3 years or 4 years, it became boring because I was like, oh my gosh, if I try to change my style, my editor won't actually like it because he'll be like, you've established a name, a byline, and people buy newspapers based on bylines, So if you want to change, you can't actually do that. Unless you take on a different thing, And I started with like reporting news, then writing features.
It's the opposite of what you want to do.
Exactly. And that's what made me realize, I need to be doing creative writing, because creative writing is always challenging. Even when you master the rules, you write 60 poems, it's not a guarantee that the 61 poem or 62nd poem is going to be easy because you know how to write a poem. You still have to approach it as a new thing. It has its own identity. Or even when you write a short story and you like it and it's successful and it's published, the next short story will need to be its own short story, So I was like, okay, this is really what I want to do, because I like being on my toes. I like thinking about how to create, like, continually. I don't like to know how to do things.
You want to work for it.
You want to earn it.
You want to sweat. You don't want it to be easy, because then it kind of reminds me of how there's several ways a musician can go.
Yes.
Fans want to hold on to an older version of a musician.
Right.
So some that become massive hits, like Drake, they never change.
They never change.
Because they want to be multimillionaires. Yeah. That's not an artist.
For me, that's like the death of an artist.
Yeah.
When you can't change.
And I will say that I would rather be dead.
Yeah.
Then that's why I changed from one podcast to the other. When people might say, it's kind of abrupt, I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It was the right time to do it.
Yeah.
And I needed a new way to challenge myself and try something else. But for the musicians that do change, what they risk, same with the writers.
Exactly.
Any artist risks losing fans because those people are tied to one voice or one style, whatever they made before, and they're penalized for changing.
Yeah.
But I like writers like you because you embrace the challenge. You see it as necessary.
Yes.
As breathing.
It is really that's perfect. Necessary as breathing. And also because the joy for me is in the experimentation, the not knowing, the finding out, So if I already know how to do something, yes, I will do it as part of competences, as part of skills, but it's not completely satisfying me than when I start something and I have no idea where I'm going and I'm experimenting, I'm taking those risks, and oh my gosh, I reach the last page and the whole thing comes out. I was like, this is where I was headed all along. And then I actually have to work backwards to see it, or step away and watch what I've just done and think about it. And that's really what gives me the kick. It's like, this is awesome.
Like, look where I started. Look where I am now. I had no idea. It reminds me of this quote from one of my favorite shows where he said, finding peace in the not knowing seems strangely more righteous than the peace that comes from knowing.
Yes.
So my question then, as a poet, but even in your life, with taking leaps from your home to Syracuse and Alabama and Denver, all of these places, what helped you overcome that fear of not knowing?
That's a good question. I guess I didn't realize that there was a fear of not knowing. This is strange because not knowing has never been a fear for me. I have other fears, and I'm not saying that I'm a fearless person. I have other fears, but so what people call the fear of not knowing doesn't exist for me. And I think that's why even when I'm moving to a new place and starting all over, it's not like there's anything to be afraid of. There's more joy to discover because I'm like, oh, what am I going to find? Where am I going to sleep? What kind of people are going to be my friends? Where am I going to, like, all those fuel me and they excite me. So I never realized that, oh my gosh, I don't know where I'm going to sleep. No, it's not like that. It's like,
it's a good question.
I wonder
it's a
where. Good question. But I don't have that kind of fear. I think the fear I have is the fear of being comfortable. Like if I'm comfortable and it's important to change, and then I start maybe not wanting to change because I'm comfortable, that's the fear I have. So sometimes I will ask myself and say, have I become comfortable? So that I realize that I am fearing not challenging that. And that's...
I resonate with that so much.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, I mean, even here,
Yeah.
part of the reason I don't do these interviews from my house is because I think it would get too comfortable.
Yes.
Like when I have to fit in a trip to Maine and Massachusetts in October, there's a whole bunch of wonder.
Yes.
And discovery of like,
sure.
I wonder what those people, like those new friendships are going to be like. What else might I find?
Yeah.
You know, how will it be? What I need to do to make sure that it's a good trip and that I'm ready.
Right.
But if it gets too routine,
yes.
And I tend to like artists that share that fear of comfort, but it also goes back to something that I read by your friend Beverly.
Oh, wow.
Unjumping.
Yes.
I had never heard that term before.
Right.
And then when I read that poem, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. She's a great
She
poet.
finally put words to something in a new way.
Yeah.
But can you talk about how that poem and how unjumping is, I guess, a framework sort of for what we're talking about?
Right. And I think thinking of all the words that begin with "and" that become a thing or become new or give us a new lens, a new perspective of seeing things. So I treat the word unjumping really with the word unlearning. Because the first time I came across the word unlearning, I was like, oh, what's that? Can you unlearn? That's new. And then I realized that I actually needed to unlearn. Like I needed to unlearn everything I had ever been told in order to find what I knew, what was truly mine and what were my own thoughts. Because I discovered, oh, these thoughts are not mine. Like some of the thoughts I had, I was like, those are definitely my father's thoughts. So what are my thoughts? And then, of course, I discovered my mother's thoughts, my culture thoughts, my society thoughts, my teacher's thoughts. And I was like, Jesus, what am I made of? Like, if I am made of other people's thoughts, who am I? Like, that freaked me out.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, unlearn. Like, so I went through this process of unlearning to discover what thought was coming in, and I could comfortably say, this is truly my thought, because I have not had this thought before. I have not had it from anyone before, and it's coming to me, and I like it, you know? So it's like assessing the thoughts I had and where they belonged or to whom they belonged helped me unlearn. So anyway, back to unjumping. It's in the same realm of stopping, first of all, and assessing, taking really stock of your life and seeing whether you're free to move on and keep going in the life you know, or whether you can reverse certain things and change certain things. And by doing that, you know, instead of taking the leap or jumping, it's like, oh, there is a thing called unjumping, where you stand and you don't jump, you don't go, but you take stock of where you are and what your life is about. And then you see what you want to do. And then that's where the unjumping comes.
And this where it comes. It's not impulsive because it's thoughtful.
It is very thoughtful.
You took that time to unjump, but it also means like you can even unlearn a ton and then learn new stuff and then unlearn that new stuff.
Yes.
Because you realized, in fact, you might have been misguided.
Exactly.
But what's great about the unlearning phase of any part of your life is it opens up more space
it does.
for you to learn.
Yeah.
about yourself again.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, think of anything that gets cluttered with too much stuff, and then you can't sort through it. You can't figure it out.
Yes.
But being able to give yourself room to learn again and to
Yes.
discover again and to change again, that's the gift. But it just takes time. You actually have to think about it. It does take
time. You have to think about it. And also you have to be fascinated by it and curious. Because even, it amazes me sometimes that I've lived with myself this long, I'm in my 40s, and I still discover things about myself that surprise me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Jesus, like I didn't know this, And sometimes it will also be seeing something on my body that has always been there. And then I see it, I was like, I have never known that. So this will sound private a bit, but this morning I got out of the shower and I was looking at my body before the mirror and I realized I have 3 birthmarks. I thought I had 1 birthmark. I was so shocked. I mean, they are at the back and I can see, it's not a part I see every day if I'm looking just in front of me. But I was at an angle, I was like, is that a birthmark? But also because the birthmark kind of blends into my skin color. I mean, that's my excuse for not seeing it before. But I had seen one, so I always thought I had 1 birthmark, like near my waist, like towards the back, like between my ribs. Surprise! 3 of them in different parts. I was like, I am turning 48 and I don't know that I have 3 birthmarks. I mean, it's like, isn't that the most surprising thing ever?
Wow.
It's like, when was I going to find out? So I started laughing because it was like the most ridiculous, but also the most exciting thing about myself.
How funny.
And funny too, because that's how I started my day. I had a new perspective of myself. I was
and like, what a strange thing to discover. Because also the symbolism with self-examination,
oh my gosh,
this being a little bit more literal,
this was literal. I was like, what else do I not know about my own body? What else?
So it's also like, where are you looking?
Yeah.
And for how long and how closely? And it's like, they always say you have to look at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Like, well, this is you did, and you found something new about yourself. That's amazing.
Oh my God.
It
was amazing.
What a great story for this conversation.
Yes. And I was like, I wonder who I will tell this story to, because first of all, it's I wouldn't say embarrassing, but it was just so funny to me, because I feel like at this point in my life, I should have already known or discovered.
See, but just when you think you know it all.
Yeah. Which is why it's like, never assume that you know anything. Like, I know myself, but I shouldn't even think that I know myself that well, because each day can be a surprise. I might discover new surprising things about, and this is a person I live with. Then how about people I don't live with? How about people, my neighbors? I can't start to make assumptions that I know who they are. And we live in a world where it's so easy to make assumptions about people. But I'm always telling myself, these people will surprise you. Like, reserve room for surprise. Even the people who have done shocking things, it's like, still reserve room to be surprised in a pleasant way, not always assuming that these are the bad guys or these people are devils or demons. It's like the moment you demonize somebody, you've actually alienated them from your life and from knowing them. And it would be helpful to say, I wonder what we have in common.
Gosh, that feels like a good place to transition from how you write and live to the books you brought to put on the bed.
Okay, so the first one is The God of Small Things, and it's by Arundhati Roy. I read it when I was working with the women writers just after my undergraduate degree. And I remember, I think it was really the first time I had read a novel that felt like I was reading poetry. The language is very lyrical. The figures of speech that she uses, they are really like exactly what we do in poetry. So the imagery, the vividness, the language is so visual and vivid and lush. It's almost like you're hearing words leap off the page. They are active. But also she's telling a story. So the story itself is very beautiful. The characters, she's really awesome at characterization. And of course the setting, it's all happening in India. But reading the first, she begins by describing the weather, like how hot the day is, and the fruits are ripening, and the air is just smelling mangoes. And I could smell that because growing up in Uganda, we have mangoes, and when it's mango season and you're walking through mango lanes, the air is suffused with mango fruit. And then when it's hot, you know that it's not just the humidity of the air, but it's almost like you're smelling humid mangoes. So I was like, wow, this is like, I get this.
Yeah.
But I would not have thought of writing it that way. So I loved that book, and because it was so alive. And for me as a poet, it really felt like I was reading a poem. I probably finished it in 2 days, and it's a big book, but I loved it. And then I wanted to read more of her work, and I realized it was her first book. She didn't have much, and her second novel really took years. She took probably like 20 years to produce another novel. And I was like, well, she did write one incredible good novel. So there is that, but now she has the second novel, The Minister of Utmost Happiness. That's the title, and she's very political. So I've read a lot of her essays, which are political. Again, campaigning and talking about how land is used, distribution of resources. So that's the first book I would say I would leave on the bed, because it gave me a lot to think about, but also it was just beautiful language. I think maybe that's when I truly fell in love with language.
Really?
Or realized that language is a thing. I mean, I was writing, but I feel like I was writing from ideas. Like I had ideas and therefore I'm writing, but I wasn't actually thinking deeply about language. How you can make language beautiful,
and alive.
And alive, and also true to the world you're describing. Yeah, so it taught me a lot about, not just about writing fiction or good fiction, but I could see how I could then use what I knew in poetry and start writing fiction. And I started writing a lot of fiction then. Before I had been just writing poetry, and then I had written 2 plays that were acted in school, and then I never wrote any other plays, But then I started really investing in fiction. And I think it was because of that book. And my friends, they read the book, so we would sometimes go out and have coffee and talk about what we were reading, because we're all aspiring writers, so reading was part of it. I come from this, the background that believes that to be a good writer, you really must be a good reader, you must read a lot. So we were reading a lot, and we just actually never had enough books. We would go through the books, and we didn't have, we don't have libraries. So we all became members of British Council, because the British Council had a library, and they would have all these British novels and poetry. And then after that, I feel like we read all the British books that were at the British Council, and then like, okay, let's join the American membership book library, whatever. And then we started to go to the American embassy where they had their library. And then we started borrowing and reading those books. So Arundhati, I think that book was a donation to FemWrite. It wasn't even a personal copy. I got my personal copy much later. So I read the FemWrite copy. My friends read it. We talked about it. We all wanted to meet Arundhati Roy.
That's amazing.
That happens when you read a book.
Have an energy about that book where,
Yeah.
I think sometimes now we lose the shared experience of art. Television is no longer on a schedule.
Right.
People no longer go the same weekend to watch a movie premiere.
Right.
It's very rare that these things happen.
Yeah.
So to have all those friends that have read the same things, and what an
We would
exciting bit of conversation to have all the time.
It was exciting because we even came up with, it wasn't a book club, it was a writers club. So because we were writers or learning to write, we realized that we needed a club to meet and read our works and receive feedback. Really, what we do in workshops, we didn't know the name could have been workshops, And so we'll talk about what we read, and then we welcomed members who strictly said they were not writers, but they loved reading. So then we would read our works and they would give us feedback. And it's like, oh, this actually works well to have a club of writers and readers who have no interest in writing, but they can listen to a story and read a story and tell you what they appreciate about it. And that club is still meeting up to this day. We started it at FemRite. It's still happening every Monday evening.
That is amazing.
It is amazing.
I didn't know that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That makes it even more special.
It is special. And whenever I visit Uganda, I go there because I meet new writers who I didn't know before, who are now part of the club and leading the club. And most of us who were, the people who are with me, I think 2 of them are not in Uganda, but I like that the idea stayed. So anyway, that book turned me onto language and paying attention to word choice, the diction and how that itself shapes the narrative.
And brought you back home a little bit with the smells.
Yes, the smells. It's a book that does the senses. It's a sensuous book for sure because you feel like the senses are awakened and alive.
And now you're making me want to read it.
Yeah,
this is what happens.
It's a good book. The book, The God of Small Things, and even the title,
I know, that's a great title.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Cool. So what about number 2?
So number 2 is The Book of Chameleons. And this is a fiction book. It's more of a novella. It's a very small volume. And it's written by Jose Agualusa, who is Angolan. Oh. And it was also actually like my first Angolan book. Because when you're growing up in Uganda, East Africa, I was exposed to a lot of East African writers and West African writers, but like in between, the languages change. Angola was colonized by the Portuguese, so the people really write in Portuguese. So if you don't speak Portuguese, you won't have access to African literature that exists only in Portuguese. And some of the French, like the Congo, the Central, again, colonized by the British and the Belgians. So if you don't speak French or what the Belgians speak, then you're lost to all African literature in those languages. And so we're Anglophone. We read only the books written in English or translated into English. And so when I got the Book of Chameleons, it's magical realism. Incredible things happen. And also the country has just gone through independence. And instead of people have suffered and done really weird, terrible things. So I won't give the narrative away. But what happened is that the main character, first of all, the narrator is a gecko. Again, animals. I was like, great. I love this book. Yes.
Meant for you.
Meant for me. So I just got into it, and the gecko is funny. It's philosophical. It's highly educated. It's imaginative. It's everything you actually want a gecko to be. And it hangs out in the library of this person on the house it's living in. It describes everything and what the owner is doing, but then it's telling a story. So that in itself, I was like, you mean you can tell a whole story through an animal? Like you don't even need a human being. And the gecko was so convincing. It was so poetic. It had its own lyrics, like the songs it loves. Oh. And then people coming to the owner of the gecko to change the past, to have a new past. So you'd think that people a country that's gone through war and become independent, you would think that people would be interested in changing their future, or they would want a new future, not these characters. They want a new past that is very convincing, very believable. And so the protagonist is creating new narratives about who these people were in the past.
Wow.
And giving it to them. And I was like, okay, this is really messing with me, like how it's working. And then the people, because the guy is so good at that fabrication, the people actually start falling in love with the fake pasts And they even show up. If he says, your grandfather was Frederick Douglass, or was the father of Frederick Douglass, and he's buried in this cemetery. They would go there and they see actually the grave is there. Like there's a tombstone. And they just like become this. So it's so weird. It's like, oh my gosh. And so, he charges a good amount. That's his living, basically. He's selling the past. I was like, I've never read a book about characters wanting to change and going to buy the past. So it's like your father, if your father is Patrick and your mother, has a name, where you were born. You're born in Michigan. Let me give you a place, and you're born there. It's like you show up to this person's house. You're like, I want a new past. So you're no longer from Michigan. You're no longer from your parents. So you have a new set of parents. And you have new siblings. You probably have an uncle living in New York City. I mean, like he would place, like,
so
truly narrow and create a whole family tree for you. And then you look at this family tree and you actually love it more than your own. And slowly you start to actually forget the real who you are, where you're from.
See, that is a highly philosophical book. Oh my gosh.
Trust the gecko to be philosophical. Yeah, it's like, that's the story. So
and that makes it even better.
It makes it better.
Because I love thinking about, one of the concepts that I'm pretty obsessed with is the idea of eternal recurrence. It poses an interesting thought exercise, though. If you did have to live the exact same life over and over and over again for eternity, what choices would you make?
Yeah.
And even though I don't believe that's going to happen, that actually does help me make choices, because I think, well, I would be stuck, again, sitting in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Would I want to do this forever?
Yeah.
Even one more year here?
Right.
And it was no. Yeah. So that helped me think I'd rather do something else, and I'd be okay with living that out for eternity.
Right.
But you often think about people as writing a new story, not rewriting their old story.
Yes.
You're right. It's almost, we're always like the hopeful, what could independence mean?
Exactly.
But they're sitting here worried about...
No, this one is going back and
that
recreating
is such a good move.
New pasts. And I was like, I've never seen a book do this. And it's magical. This gecko is funny. The characters are funny because they're actually getting obsessed with their new pasts that are not even true, and then they become true. So it's also a question of what is truth, what is fiction, what narrative, like what if you could change the narrative of your life, not just the present, but it raises a lot of really, really significant questions.
And I think all of us, in smaller ways, not the whole history, but we all tell ourselves stories about our past to help us live with it now.
Yes.
It's better to be honest about it, I think.
Yeah.
But we all revisit the past and maybe downplay something that was really hard, or pretend like something was better than it was.
Yeah.
But we often don't fall in love with an actual fake account of what happened.
Right.
Which is where that starts to get
that's
very...
where it starts to be
that stresses me out.
Different
to
thing.
think of, that you could... But think about it. I think I could believe a different life about myself if I really tried hard enough.
Right.
And if it was better.
Then you embrace it.
And because our past so often informs how we look at the future.
Absolutely.
This is where it starts...
change completely.
And so it's like,
just,
wow.
Yeah. They show up like
that actually didn't happen.
And confident because their past is secure. They know it now. I was like, what the...
you don't have to deal with the reality of the past.
Yeah.
It's not complex because you were just given it.
Exactly.
So doesn't everything feel better when you don't have
Everything feels better. And so I loved that book.
Oh my gosh.
I think I've read that book 6 times.
6? Oh,
yes.
That's when you know it's good.
Yeah. It's good.
And though
each
I have a
time
feeling that I'll do the
it,
same thing purely for the gecko.
Yeah. Yes.
I love when writers take a risk that it's because it feels right and they don't consider that it might go poorly. So this reminds me of one of the interviews on season 1 that's coming up.
Right.
Jim Minnick, the poet. You'll be with him up in Burnsville, September. You should meet him.
I will.
He lives in Smith County, Virginia, but he wrote a novel, his only novel, and it's called Fire is Your Water. And in between all the chapters is a chapter from the perspective of a talking bird.
Wow, I'm sold.
And that could be something that people are like, that's too much or whatever. It might not work. But for me, it made the whole book.
It does make the whole book.
Because what a way to shake up the human element of all of it, to say like, hey, this is what the bird thinks.
Yes.
And it replays the same scene, but what the bird's thinking in the scene that right after the humans do it.
Exactly.
So they're riding in the car and, someone says this.
Yes.
And so the person reacts. But then to see what a bird thinks of all of it.
Right.
Is pretty incredible.
Yes.
So I that's why I was really resonating with the gecko, because I'm like, okay, if I liked Jim's book that much, I think I'll also love that move in this book.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to give away the author, because the gecko, in the end, there are suggestions that the gecko was a writer, and the writer is named. And so when he died, he reincarnated as a gecko. That's why the gecko has like this consciousness.
Oh man, this sounds weird
that
and
writer,
great. So,
oh my God. So I'm not telling you the name of this writer, but when I discovered that it was even this writer, I was like, oh my God, it makes perfect sense.
Okay, now that might be the first one of these. Well, we'll see what you're 2 for 2 in terms of convincing me to read these books. They sound awesome.
They're really awesome.
What's the next one?
Then the third one is actually the tarot book. And it's the traditional rider tarot. It's called the Tarot's Companion. I really like that book. It was my first tarot book, and now I have like 3 of them by different authors and different artists, because the cards, like the images on the cards, for me are some of the most creative. It's not even so much about the writing, because sometimes when I wake up first thing in the morning, meditating, or I'm just quiet, I will shuffle the cards and I'll pick a card, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I have a poem coming. So I would just keep looking at the card. Wow. And it's not really ekphrastic art, because I'm not even describing the card. It's like a line will pop up and then I'll start writing.
Just from the image.
Just from the image. So now I have really like 20 poems that are inspired by the tarot. So that's going to be actually like my next poetry book. It's going to be poetry that's coming from just looking at these tarot cards and writing. So the reason I have this book is that for people who actually like to engage their imagination, I would recommend like having a tarot book, because these images are archetypes and they are timeless. They are coming from way like the past, but they're also telling us narratives and stories that we can buy into even today. Like sometimes I'll read the narrative, I'll finish writing the poem because I don't actually want to know what the narrative is until I finish writing, and then I'll read I was like, oh, I actually like this. Like I can see this. So I sometimes I will try to I'll say, okay, today I'm going to become this figure that the tarot that I've picked, If I've picked the King of Cups, it's like the King of Cups is in touch with his emotions. He's generous. He speaks the truth. I was like, okay, today I'm going to really think about how I'm speaking my truth, how I'm in control of or in touch with my emotions. I'm going to give something away because I need to practice generosity. So I will actually do it. And then I'll show up in Cap and Hall and there will be something I'm asked to do, and I'll be like, my truth on this is not, like there's an opportunity right away to say my truth, which maybe I wouldn't say if I hadn't picked that card.
Wow, so
I would be maybe diplomatic, and I'm like, oh, it's not going to be diplomatic here. Like, it's my truth. And I'll say it. I was like, holy cow, this tarot could get me in trouble.
Yeah, that's your cop-out, is if anyone gets mad at you. It's like, well, the tarot made me do it.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's so creative, regardless of which card I pick. So I'm liking it that it's actually inspiring me to write. And also because of the constraints, when you have just one card and you're looking at it and you're writing, you're likely to finish that writing project. So I don't need a chunk of time, which I happen not to have anyway, like when the semester is on. So I am loving and I keep going to the original tarot book, the Tarot's Companion, because the images, even the other books I have, you could see that their images have borrowed something from these traditional 72 images. And, they have different characters, different challenges, but also they are very elemental. And I think I've always been fascinated by the elements. And I feel like my life, like I try to create balance through the sense, like, how am I doing with water? How am I doing with fire? And sometimes I'll be aware that there's way too much fire in me, and I need to actually detox or whatever, or like go through a process of letting the fire out so that I don't burn things or other. And other times, like I'm so comfortable with earth, like being grounded and being on earth, but I'm aware that water challenges me. So if there's an element I would like to befriend more and learn, so it's the water. So anyway, these cards, these 4 cards, 4 suits, they will each suit speaks to water, earth, fire, and air. So again, it's for me, it's like it's the best way to be in touch with the elements almost on a daily basis, but you don't know which element you're going to pick until you shuffle, and then you pick them. And then if it's the majors, you don't know which figure is going to be your influence that day until you shuffle the cards and you see, you pick a figure. And it's like, if you pick the upside down, the hanged man, then you're supposed to be thinking about, like changing your perspective or acquiring a new perspective or seeing things from a new perspective. So I'll look at that, I was like, oh, this is so timely, because there would be something going on through my mind, and I'll be thinking about it and like not seeing a solution. I was like, oh, like I'm looking at it in a way that's not going to help. I really need to really reverse or change my thinking about it. And also I like Wayne Dyer. I listen to his YouTube. He has this phrase that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So whenever I pick such a card, I will think that phrase will come in. I was like, oh, how can I change the way I'm looking at this situation right now so that the situation changes by just changing the way I'm actually thinking about it? Because sometimes that's all we need, and the problem is solved. What we thought was a problem stops being a problem. So the cards help me. It's like I really, really use them. They
Truly,
are like
it's a companion.
It's a companion. They are my most practical.
This makes me think
guide.
That could be an interesting exercise for students.
I've thought of teaching a course just using the tarot, and I'll call it divinatory poetics, because tarot is divination. It's like you're divining, you're a diviner, but also for students, it's creative, and it will inspire you to...
And there is a prompt, but it's not in a literal question in terms of words.
Exactly.
It's not right about this.
Exactly.
You're just looking at something, which also can take the pressure off of instruction.
Exactly.
Like I can tell you, I do not do well when someone tells me to do something specifically.
Right.
This
is very open. It's open prompts. You look at the card, you just start writing. So you could even...
I think you should do it.
I should, yeah. I have wanted to do it, because the more I invest in the tarot, the more I think of how can I bring in the tarot into my creative writing classes and actually set the students free. Like they would realize all the creative ideas that are embedded in the images, but also how they really inspire us. Because I feel like those figures being archetypal, they awaken something deep within us that's buried that we never even knew was there. And so you don't even need the narrative. And I like the tarot narratives, but for me, it's about the cards, the images. And so I would leave the tarot and probably with a deck on the bed so that the person who, is there will spend time just getting fascinated by these images and also how people who complain of being bored, it's like just buy a tarot book, and the deck, because when you shuffle and you read, it's like you start to get ideas.
It's stimulation immediately.
It's stimulation for sure.
Oh man, I would love that, because then I could, thinking of staying at someone's house, if someone did put that on the bed, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Yes. I would definitely be curious.
Yes.
And that is also, you really do need to link up with Jim, because in our conversation, he talks about an author that wrote 4 books based on the elements. Because he had to do all of them.
Yes.
So anyway,
I'm glad.
We'll try
Then
to
I will-
connect you since you're going to be
Yes.
in the same place
Yes.
in a week.
In a week, next week. Yeah.
So I'll make sure
next
to,
weekend.
if you're open to it, to
Okay. Yeah. So then the next book, is that the third or the fourth? The fourth book, yes, is it's called Artful, and it's by Alice Smith. She's a British writer, and it's a collection of essays, very non-traditional essays, very experimental, and she covers basically four things. The fourth is like reflections, but the first one is on form. So I'm actually fascinated by structure. Like I love talking about form and teaching forms.
of course
and
you do.
Really? Okay. So when I read her version of like on form and describing, first of all, how actually form comes from formlessness. That's how even the world began. Like the world was formless, and the poet, which happened to be a divine figure, God, spoke into the void and created, heaven and earth and separated the waters, and boom, the world came into being. So that's like one aspect of form, creating form from words, from the void, from the emptiness. So already there are so many, like just the first page alone, you read it, you're like, oh my gosh, let me stop here and actually start creating, because now I see where this is going.
Because I can do anything.
I can do anything. Yes, that book was the most liberating book in letting me know that I could actually write anything, like taking risks. It's a book on experimenting and taking risks in creative writing, in life actually, but mostly, she's really speaking about, I think, the writing process. And it's not the same. And her second chunk, she addresses being on edge, and what it's like, and how great artists mime the edge and walk the edge, like the razor sharp edge. And so she goes, I was like, oh, I could actually take this literally, and in my next fiction piece, I'm going to put a baby, like the first line is going to say, there's a baby on the edge of a cliff.
Wow.
It's like you've already put the baby in danger. And also, how did the baby get to be on edge? Like, where are the parents? What's going to happen? It's in the, but that's the thing. So already I have an idea that this is going to be magical realism kind of story, because there's no way this baby, just if it keeps crawling, it will really fall. It could fall and die, and that's the story. But I don't want the baby to die yet. So it's like this ego comes and grabs the baby and starts really nursing the baby. It's like the child is raised by a bird. But what gave me those ideas of like, you can write a story like that, make it believable, make it real, give it emotional resonance, was because I read how, when you're out of ideas, it's like you can think with a concept like being on edge, or somebody, or putting a character on edge, and then that sets your imagination free to start creating. And then she also addresses time and how different disciplines look at time differently, and she goes into like the laws and other things. But I just loved every section of that book. And I have taught it a lot. It's probably one of the books I've taught more often than not, just because I can see what it does for students too. It gives them permission to really actually do anything, to create. It's very inspiring. And it's called Artful, and it begins with a quote from the Artful Dodger, who is this character in Charles Dickens' book, who is like part of a gang of thieves, and how weirdly or mysteriously thieves can be connected with quickness and the god of Mercury, communication and taking charge of things in a way but how artists, in a way, while we are not encouraged to steal ideas from other people, but we are also, getting things from the universe, from wherever these sources are, and creating them and turning them into our own materials.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important for students and people that are long into their art career, because sometimes, again, you can get caught up in a rigid process or feeling like one thing was successful, so I have to remake that thing. just a
Yes.
little bit differently so people still like it. It reminds me of a Willa Cather quote where she says the protagonist is riding out to Nebraska to live from the mountains in Virginia, which is what happened to her.
Right.
She went from the Appalachian Mountains to the plains in Nebraska, and she said it wasn't a country at all, but the materials from which a country was made.
Wow.
And you can take that anyway, but for me, that's how I looked at creating a life. As if I was on a train and I saw this land and I was like, there's really nothing out here.
Right.
I can start over.
Exactly.
And I can be whatever I want with this podcast.
Yeah.
It is mine.
Yeah.
You don't get to tell me how to structure it.
Yeah.
You don't get to, and not in a negative way. It's like way more fun to start from nothingness than I'm going to take their setup and make it mine. There's no joy in that. That's not creativity. That is worry about, is mine going to be as good as theirs?
Exactly.
And you can do that in your life and you can do that in your art. So to hear this book talk about, even so quickly, you started to get energized.
Oh yeah,
That's
first
amazing.
page alone, I was like, this is a lot. Like, let me start. And I also, that's how I read. It's like, I want to read something that I can actually then do. Like make it happen, make it my experience. So if I read a page and I'm feeling, the awakened and the light and the joy, I was like, oh, that means I need to actually ingest this and do it. So I will do it. So that book, each page is very inspiring. And I think that's how I do all the readings nowadays. I never used to read like that. I mean, I would read for the joy of enjoying the story. And then once it's done, put it aside. But now reading is really like eating. It's like I'm taking in what I'm reading and making it my own food.
And it's giving you energy and nourishment and life. And I think that is an important thing. Like when people say, oh, why would you read so much? It is necessary to my existence in the way that food would be. Or water. It's just another part of that diet that I wouldn't be able to live without.
Yes.
And definitely not a good life. If I were absent books or films, it would be like a nutrient that you take out of your diet that is somehow going to cause problems.
I don't know how life would be, honestly, because we learn so much from books and from the experiences of others, and we become truly more compassionate and empathetic because of reading, because of the films, because of the creativity and the artistry that surrounds us. So to not have that, we would be a totally different people.
Oh, I love that. Like an instructional, but not in like that book. It seems like it's not a manual. No. It is meant to just draw out something from you.
Yes.
And truly be inspirational.
Yes.
So I love that. Gosh, that's great that you teach it.
Oh, thank you.
So what's number 5?
Number 5 is Drinking from the River of Light, and it's by Mark Nepo. One of the parts I enjoy, he talks about, he's writing about witnessing, or why we have witnesses, or the importance of having a witness, and why, like a lot of authors, or a lot of, whenever life is happening, like when you have a witness, they not only validate your experience, but they are able to value what you've gone through, so that you come out of it okay, regardless of what that experience is about. And I get the sense that he has studied and read a lot of books. So in his essays, they are not, I don't even know how to categorize his essays. He will, bring in like James Baldwin, bring in Rumi, bring in all these authors, all these wonderful authors we love, and make a quote, or Nietzsche, and have something that Nietzsche said and make it his own and give his own experience. So when I read the book, and also he has lessons at the end of the book, he's like, you don't have to do this, but if you're encouraged, you can do it by yourself or with a friend. So he has these exercises that are actually designed like to be shared. Like think about, things that have to do with reflection and how you can take what you have just read in a chapter and see how it applies to your life, and then share with a friend how this thing is happening. So it's probably a book that's good to be read by friends and then talked about, or couples. And it's not a guide. He's not telling you like how to live your life, but he's making sense. It's like making sense of life, how almost each experience can be a good experience if you know how to make sense of it, without being philosophical about it, but in a way that really honors life. Because I feel like this book is still more focused about living the authentic life, like how to be true to yourself, to your experience. And so he gives examples from his own life, from the lives of other artists. And when I read it, I really felt like there was a lot of light in that book. It's like you're drinking, instead of drinking from water, it's like you're drinking from light. You're being illuminated, or you're finding illumination in everything that he says. And so I categorize him as one of those enlightened beings who write about.
That's a good point. It's always a good sign when you feel that, you sense that light.
Yeah.
You want to follow it.
It's like a spiritual guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. It hits me in that realm of the spirit.
How did you come to that book?
I was at Malaprops, and I picked his book called Joy. I think that was the title. Yes, it was called Joy. And I was like, wow, that's kind of my book.
Yeah.
So, and it's made, the shape, the book of Joy was almost like this kind of size. And I read it and I loved it, because in that book he was giving his experience, how, he had cancer, and then he did treatment, and that was his turning point. Like he had to change his life or question what he was doing. They changed jobs, did everything like completely, about a complete about turn. And also finding joy, regardless of what's happening to him health-wise. And then he recovered and started writing and teaching and talking about finding inspiration and all these things.
Yeah.
So I loved that book, and then I looked him up, Google, to see what other books he had written. Yeah. And so that's how I found Drinking from the River of Light had just come out. So I ordered that. I really loved it. And I've read two of his other books. They are all really good and different. He writes like, did you ever read Anamkara? John Donahue. Who I'm not pronouncing.
Yeah, John O'Donohue.
Yes,
yeah.
John O'Donohue.
Oh my gosh.
They are in the same spirit. So actually, when I was thinking of this book, I was like, maybe Anamkara is the book. But then I was like, oh, this one, I mean, they are both great.
Yeah.
But I ended up picking this one.
That's kind of what it feels like, right?
Yeah.
You're just choosing out of good options.
Exactly.
All of them would be great.
Exactly.
It's funny about Anamkara, though. So one of my first interviews, again, from my last podcast, was my favorite songwriter, who actually is now the theme. She provided the theme music for Books on the Bed. Mm-hmm. Try to keep those connections throughout all of it.
Right.
She actually, this was so funny in our interview. She's very quiet and a very contemplative person, which makes her one of the greatest living songwriters to me. Mm-hmm. And I hope way more millions of people listen to her. I make it my charge to let people know about Eliza Edens, because she's so good. But in regards to John O'Donohue, she took a lot of inspiration from that book, but also said that she listens to him talk to reduce her anxiety before bed.
Wow.
Because he's so calming and
he's
soothing.
He's very calming, yeah.
And so I think when you were talking about that book, yeah, it's good to have something that isn't telling you what to do. It's a gentle guide.
It is a very gentle guide.
And so when you talk about light,
and
it's not shaking you, saying you have to do this. It's something that it's just to contemplate. And it reminded me of her listening to him, because it's a gentle thing to read a book and then consider what it means to you and to help you make sense of your life.
Right.
Because it's a delicate thing.
It is a very delicate thing. And those, I call those my spiritual teachers, and then I was like, well, they are teaching me more, not just the life of the spirit, but really the everyday life. So they are my everyday teachers. That book, Anamkara, and also the space to bless the space between us. I think that was his next book. I just loved reading it because I could hear his voice in his words. It's like it is really like he was speaking the words to me. I just could close my eyes and listen. But my eyes were open because I was reading. But I felt, they are very meditative.
Yes.
And I also did listen to his podcast on being.
That's one of the most popular of all time.
Yes. So
it's just excellent.
It's excellent. Yeah. So people like that who come across as truly authentic, living their truth, but also sharing what has helped them. And they are not saying, oh, this path is easy, or this is how to live an easy life, but like, this is how it's worked for me, and I think it can help you too. I just love those books.
Isn't that what sharing's about, though? Even a poem. You just never know how it's going to help someone.
Yeah.
Find joy, change their life, see something from a different perspective.
Exactly.
So that's why this exercise is so fun.
It is
It's because
fun.
when these go out, who knows who's going to listen to you talk about these books and be like, wait, that sounds like something I need to read right now.
Yeah.
Or I really want to read it.
Right.
So that's what's fun to think about.
Yes.
Is how far things reach.
Exactly.
And the ways in which they make an impact in people's lives that are tangible in the day-to-day.
Exactly.
So it's not philosophical. These things can really help.
They can really help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about the last one?
The last one is a poem by Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. So I couldn't really get like a poetry collection. And I was like, but I remember when I read that poem when I was in high school. And again, I feel like, oh my God, I have been writing poems and like not really thinking about them, but I was like, I want to be a poet. So I actually made a decision to be a poet. I was already a poet because I was writing poems, but I wasn't a poet, if that makes sense. So it's like there is always a moment, maybe sometimes there is a moment when you become aware of making the choice. You're aware that this thing has chosen you and you're also choosing it. So I was aware that I was writing poetry. I was the kind of person to show up on people's birthday with a poem, the gifts of poems and, like write poems about people and write poems about weddings and baptisms. I mean, like occasional poetry, but also poetry about, my animals back home in Uganda, life, politics, everything. But I didn't make a conscious decision to be a poet until I read that poem, Still I Rise. I felt like the voice was so powerful, and the persona, the character, the things she was going through, and she's like, even though I do this, and like choosing to be, or determining to stay who she really is, to be herself, to be strong, and not to listen, to the world that's actually really like out to crush her.
Just give me chills.
Yeah.
Like, and we just talked about earlier, Glennis sharing the Lucille Clifton poem.
Yeah.
It's amazing how you both chose a single poem. That felt like hey, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I loved that poem. And then it made me read all Maya Angelou's books. And I do like all her work, all her books. But for me, if I'm to always like to single out one thing, it's that poem, Still I Rise, that just, it made me love her too. Yeah. It made me love the author, like, oh my gosh, I really love this woman. Not just the poem. I loved the poem for sure. But I also felt like I just loved the writer then. And I think that's a magical thing when you read somebody's works and you love the works, but you also feel that you love the author. You don't always have to love the author. And sometimes authors are awful people when you get to know them.
And that complicates it.
Yeah, which complicates things. But I just feel like, oh, I love this woman.
How great that a poem can bring you into the whole world of an author.
Yeah.
And give you even more.
Yeah.
I love those starting
like
points.
Why the Caged Bird Sings and
and she's had such an impact on so many writers.
Yeah.
I actually must say, Maya and I share a birthday.
Wow,
And
that's awesome.
And I didn't figure that out until my senior year of college.
Yeah.
Someone who then became my girlfriend,
Yeah.
like 6 months later,
Wow.
had said happy birthday and like, how cool you get to share one with Maya Angelou. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so I've always taken that as a little bit of like, we're connected.
Yes, you are. You really are. I mean, your spirit actually does do what Maya does in her work, and also trying to get, first of all, having conversations with different people and respecting people. You have this really beautiful sense of respect and just wanting to share the generosity. And I feel like that comes across in her writing. I never met her in life, but so I get whatever I'm saying from reading her work and also listening to her tapes on YouTube, like when she's reading and talking.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, she's a presence. Like you feel like I am in the presence of a God, and not just a God because she's like way up there, but a God who is also very, very earthy, very grounded, who has gone through a lot, but is still a complete human being.
I think that's what I admire most about, like, my heroes are not people who seem above me.
Right.
And they don't want to be.
Exactly.
But they demonstrate this resilience and this fullness of human spirit that feels like I can be that way, and you want to be around it. You want to listen to it. I mean, there are a lot of folks that I'll never get to meet.
Right.
That I do go to YouTube. I'll find anything.
Yeah.
Literally anything.
Yeah.
Just so that I can feel that fullness of spirit.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to see with Maya Angelou, but like you can trace it. Musicians, or even certain bookstore owners that I've met. The common theme is that people have this presence that is very powerful, but it's so human.
It is so human.
That it's relatable and it's comforting.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you feel like, wow, I don't like how we worship people.
Yeah, I don't like it either. Because people, at the end of the day, they are people. That's what we forget. Yeah. But also we live in a world that creates hierarchies and says this person is more important than this one because of their role or because of this. And that's all BS, frankly, because everybody is important for just being alive and being here. Because when that important figure is gone, who will say, this person is important? I mean, when you stop breathing, it's like you've left this world and you've taken, true, people will still talk about your legacy and stuff like that, but you're not here. Period. It's like you're missing out on what's here. And while I don't know what's over there, but it's like what's important is acknowledging that the person in front of you is alive and breathing and deserving to be there, like to be present. The moment they are gone, that's another story. So yeah, I wish I could always, like remember this, to honor each being, not because they are great or they hold these positions, but because they are alive and present.